Welcome to the fourth orientation module for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Today we're going to talk about EDI at AACN and just a really brief overview of the work that we are currently undertaking. And knowing that this work that we're going to talk about is really just a very brief overview and that there are a lot of components embedded within each of these. So today we're going to provide an overview of the three focus areas that we believe will propel our EDI work forward. And we're going to try to gain a deeper understanding of the approach that we're taking to implement each focus area. So we have three focus areas that we believe our EDI will help take our EDI work to the next level. And these three areas are focused on intelligence gathering. So this is basically data gathering and what kind of learning can we gain from engaging our community. We are continually looking at how we resource the work. And then finally, we are creating a roadmap to AACN's equitable future. So we'll go into each one of these a little bit more in depth. So intelligence gathering and community engagement. This focus area includes understanding the story that our data has to tell. It's the stories that we might get from social media. It's the stories that we might learn about from our community. So we will be presenting in October, I believe, looking at a review of the existing community impact survey data through an equity lens, meaning that rather than looking at this data from our normal segments of new AACN member, long-standing member, non-AACN customer, and non-AACN member, or just a no affiliation, instead of looking at that through those four lenses, if I said five earlier, I apologize. We'll look at it through, well, when we look at the data from a gender, a race, an educational level, an age component, what does that tell us? How does that allow us to view the information and understand the impact that we're having on various segments of our community? This next area that we're talking about, that we talk about in community engagement, is really gaining an understanding of what's happening in our community. We can sit here in our AACN offices and think, wow, we have a pretty good idea of what our community needs, but that is just us making assumptions. Probably some of them are really well-informed assumptions. But we don't know, for instance, what does our community want? What is their true experience with equity, diversity, and inclusion? How do they perceive AACN in that way, from that lens? How are they experiencing that, like I said, in their workplaces? And what are their expectations of AACN in addressing this work? So this is what we are currently engaged in, and we will be engaging a partner to do some qualitative and quantitative research for us. And we hope that that work will begin soon. We're in the process of interviewing organizations or companies to help us with that. The second is about resourcing the work. So many of you know that I took this position and started this position in March while I was working with the board at the time when we began to have these diversity and inclusion discussions at the board table. I've been involved with every aspect of that work since 2016. And so this creation of this EDI lead position allowed me to focus specifically on EDI. And as much as I love my work with the board and cherish that work, it was time to be able to focus specifically on EDI. It is a passion for me. So that it was nice to be able to say, okay, we have someone now that we can have as a full-time resource. We also this past spring established an internal EDI council that is made up of team members. And their work is going to be that as role of champions. They will become hopefully become facilitators of some of the work that we do, sort of our EDI consultants throughout the organization, coming up with recommendations to for how we're going to educate our staff ongoing, how we might onboard our staff, how we're going to educate and onboard the board, and all of those types of things. And in the future, I expect that we will convene a community EDI advisory group as we look to figure out how that group might engage with us and advise us on equity, diversity, and inclusion issues, both internally as far as the work that we're doing and the products that we're producing, but also with the board, and perhaps coming up with a way that there's an advisory group that facilitates or introduces an EDI lens to the work that the board is doing. All of these are very, very new, not fully conceptualized ideas, but it's possible that in the future we could see something like that. And finally, we are creating a roadmap to AACN's equitable future. So this is how are we integrating the equity lens into our enterprise-wide planning? How is EDI going to get really embedded as a thread throughout our EWP and into our everyday work? So currently, to create this roadmap, we are in the process and have harvested programs, practices, policies that anyone on the AACN team could submit as, from their perspective, needing an equity lens applied to it. Our next step is going to be to prioritize those, and we will again engage the whole team, AACN team, to identify which are the highest priority items. And we'll then, once we have that list prioritized and mapped out, we will then go through this process of applying an equity lens. Now, some of that work may actually start earlier, but before we get to the full prioritization, because there's some things that we're doing that need an equity lens applied to them as we're developing it. So that's a really brief overview of the work that we're doing. As I said before, passion, not just my passion, but the passion of the board, the passion of our senior leadership team, has led us here to where we are able to have an orientation for the board and that this work becomes embedded in everything that we do at AACN. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for hanging in with me over the 4 sessions. And I look forward to seeing you when we meet for our discussion. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.